Hi, listeners. This is Chris Batts, your host of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. Today, I interviewed an Arkansas native who is a legal department executive of the Fortune 1 company many of you know called Walmart. We discussed the genesis and reason for his now role to lead the Office of Outside Counsel Management and Legal Operations, better known as Legal Ops. Just a reminder, the PDF transcript of this audio is available to download. Go to liongrouprerecruiting.com/podcast. As many of you know, we interview corporate defense law firm leaders, partners, general counsel, and legal consultants. You are listening to episode 25 of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast.
Broadcasting from Kansas City, this is the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In each episode, you'll receive actionable ideas and hear personal leadership stories of the top corporate defense law firms from around the United States. Enjoy a front row seat with law firm leaders, their partners, and legal consultants as we discuss life and leadership.
Welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Batts with the Lion Group. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Bryan, Senior Associate General Counsel of Walmart. Alan leads the Office of Outside Counsel Management and Legal Operations, overseeing certain internal operations and processes as well as the relationship with all company U.S. law firms. He also serves as adjunct professor at the University of Arkansas School of Law, where he created and teaches the first known law school course dedicated solely to the operation of corporate legal departments. Mr. Bryan previously managed litigation at the Fortune 1 company for its approximate 5,000 Walmart and Sam's Club stores across the U.S. Before joining Walmart, he was a litigation partner with Arkansas's then largest law firm. Alan, welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Chris. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
So, Alan, I wanted to jump in, and it might be an easy question and an obvious one, but I wanted to ask, why Walmart? Why did you end up joining the behemoth of a retailer from private practice?
Well, a couple of things. Just a little bit of background about me. I practiced law for about a decade after graduating law school, had become a partner in my firm, and was seeing a shift in the nature of my practice, which was general litigation, a shift into a different type of litigation, really financial-based litigation, bankruptcy-related litigation, all stemming post-financial crisis of 2008. And I was also really thinking about long-term what I wanted to do. And one of my long-term desires was to lead people. And as you know, in a law firm, that's a little bit different in situation and timing, in the sense that you may lead people towards the end of your career, but I wanted to lead people before that. And so I really started thinking about whether the law firm was the best place for me, and happened to be working at the time in my law firm's Fayetteville, Arkansas branch office. And Walmart's in the backyard. And of course, being originally from Arkansas, obviously I knew the company well. And I decided in 2011 to take a leap so that I would have that opportunity, or more opportunities rather, to really not just practice law, but also lead others.
It sounded like Walmart gave you the opportunity to do that?
Yes. And in fact, you don't exactly enter the company, and this is probably the same with most corporate legal departments, and take on a leadership role, but it so happened that there was a position open managing litigation that was store-related litigation, which was really my bailiwick. And so I took that position and really got to know the company for about 18, 19 months, and then was asked to manage all the outside counsel relationships.
Let's pivot to that. Tell us about how this department came to be.
The position of outside counsel management is somewhat unique. There's not a lot of corporate legal departments that have it, but Walmart established the position in approximately 2005, somewhere in that area, to manage what it was seeing as a growing list of outside preferred and panel counsel. It was also, at the time, busy recruiting more outside counsel to not only bolster its capabilities and capacity, but also to enhance the diversity of the outside counsel panel and the attorneys that worked for the company. So ultimately, long story short, through the recruitment process, there were upwards of 900, 1,000 law firms that were at one time, or over 1,000, approved to do work for the company.
Wow.
And there's a lot of logistical management that goes into that. And that's where the position was created, or why it was created originally. It has evolved since that time. In fact, as I took over the position, it was still somewhat administrative, logistical, kind of a relationship-based function. And about 3 years ago, it was elevated to include not just this external management piece, but also to have an internal-facing look at our processes and procedures and people, and really to find inefficiencies and drive efficiencies internally, which obviously touches the external outside counsel management relationship, since that is the bulk of our spend.
It was efficiencies, it was coverage with law firms, and so this all basically created your role as running the legal operations function.
Correct.
I know we were going to talk about this process and steps for you. So there was a lot of internal management, external management. How did this evolve as to the point where now you're teaching it? Like, give us some more history as far as what happened with this role and managing 900 to 1,000 law firms. That's a lot.
It is. And I would say I had the position I'm in now, or I had the management portion of the position for about 2 years before we established this legal operations team within legal. And I had had an opportunity to really take a look at what had been done and what needed to be done. And as luck would have it, we had a bit of a leadership shakeup, and it was decided at the time that we should, as a department, we should be looking at becoming more efficient, more lean. And so the legal operations team was born, and it was built around this idea of having outside counsel management, but we also added a data and analytics team that had project managers and data scientists, a communications person, a graphic designer, and then, of course, we have a diversity inclusion attorney. And this whole group was able to come together in about 2015 and really start taking a look at itself, taking a look at the legal department. And what we found, and this is where the benefit of having 2 years came in, is we found a lot of things that needed to change. And so the deputy general counsel came to me in August of 2015 and just asked me my thoughts on what needed to change. And it was a lot. And really, without going into all the details, one of the first things we needed to do was to reset the relationship we had with our law firms, which had been, while it had been managed centrally through the office I described, it was really the engagements themselves and some of the rate negotiations. Several aspects of the relationship were still taking place in a siloed fashion and were taking place within the practice areas. And one of the suggestions I had was, let's bring everyone in and get everyone on the same page. The second major thing we did at the time was we had to, in order to look down the line where we wanted to be able to measure ourselves and measure success and really become more data-driven in our decision-making, we had to go in and really look at the data we had. We had roughly 15 to 20 years of hundreds and hundreds of law firms coming into our system. I should say systems, because over the course of that time, we went through at least 3 major matter management systems and invoicing systems. And so you collect through that process, and particularly with our volume of matters, a lot of data. But over time, it becomes stale, and it also may have inaccuracies within it. And so the second major thing we did, besides getting every law firm on the same page, was we undertook a very major data cleanup of our systems, meaning the law firms within them, the timekeepers within them, and as well as a lot of documentation. And so this was to kind of lay the foundation for what we wanted to accomplish in the coming years.
When you said you brought everybody in and got them on the same page, did you actually have kind of a summit of all the firms that came in?
We did, not initially. We did bring in the major firms, not hundreds and hundreds of firms, but the firms that handled the vast majority of our work, we did bring them in after about 15 or 16 months of going through this process of cleaning the data and renegotiating engagement terms and rates for firms. We brought in those strategic firms that handled the majority of our work, and we really introduced them to the concept and the historical background of why we created a legal operations unit. And that was to become less of a law firm attached to a company and more of a business unit. And that's where I think you see, broadly speaking, a lot of corporate legal departments going. It's no longer okay, and it hasn't been really okay, to simply say it's legal. It's a cost of doing business. What corporations, I think, want to see post-financial crisis is more and more effort in their cost centers to control costs and to create efficiencies. And that's where I think you've seen the growth of legal operations across many corporate legal departments.
Bryan, what was it like to kind of bring those outside counsel, critical firms back to the drawing board and talk about what you're doing? Talk about the function of this new department. How was it received? Did you have pushback? Did you have to find firms? Was there anything you can share in that insight as you are making changes?
We've had minimal pushback along the way, but it's more on technicalities and, really actually I wouldn't even call it pushback. In some instances, it's helping us improve on some of our initiatives that we've rolled out to the firms. But broadly speaking, the firms were very receptive to it. They understand, and this comes from the fact that many of them have done our work for a long time, that while we are a Fortune 1 company currently, we are a retailer, and not everything you see in revenues falls to the bottom line. So we have to be cost conscious. We have always been cost conscious, and we've relayed that culture to our law firms and expect them to be efficient as well. And so it was not a large surprise to most of our long-standing strategic firms. I think that if there was anything that was new, it was this idea that we were trying to become more and more innovative. And I think some law firms have not at the time, and even some today have not caught up with that concept, which I think is a nice profession itself too.
Yeah. So I guess this is a good moment just to say, what advice would you give law firms that are not caught up in the notion of innovation as you say it? What advice would you give them?
Well, I think obviously it's a firm by firm basis. It depends on the type of practice or practice groups that your law firm has. It depends on the size, the number of people. But I think for a lot of firms, the conversation needs to be had about investments in people and investments in technology. There is, for instance, technology now coming to fruition, and actually we're using a little bit of it and will continue to, that is going to really change a lot of the dynamics of how law is practiced. A lot of firms need to be paying attention, at least, to the technological advances and how that will shift the landscape of their business model. At the same time, you've seen, and for many years, over a decade, this continued growth of legal process organizations and alternative legal service providers that are really providing the purchasers of legal services different ways to do things. Obviously, this I think had its genesis in the e-discovery realm as discovery became more and more of a complex endeavor where you were talking about, large amounts of data, large numbers of documents. In order to find cost savings, it could no longer be that you would provide, as it was when I started practice, a big group of baker's boxes full of documents and have associates in conference rooms looking through them. Now things are electronic. You have technology that can find words within groups of documents and do all sorts of front-end work that attorneys no longer do. that was kind of the genesis of alternative legal service providers, but also of this kind of wave of technology that is helping us practice law more efficiently. And so to your original question, law firms should be looking into technology. They should be looking into different types of employees for the firm, such as project managers and data scientists and others who can help guide the firm that are not necessarily lawyers. But I also know that what I'm suggesting or any type of innovation, whether it be technology, pricing models, it's a difficult proposition because most law firms are set up in a partnership fashion. And so it takes a little bit of a really group effort to get there.
Just to assist my listeners, what type of tools would you suggest when you talk about technology? You listed out some of the non-lawyer roles. Do you have the freedom to share what tool you're using now you alluded to and or other types of tools, that more advanced technology that helps, that's just being brought to the legal market?
Sure. Well, one example I'll give you two or three, but one would be our use of artificial intelligence. I know it's a buzzword that's out there today. We have tested various types of artificial intelligence within the discovery realm. In other words, taking the bots and having them search through documents. We've used it in public relations context. But in the spring, we introduced a partnership with a company called Legalmation, which is using wasnt technology to take a complaint and feed it into the Legalmation system and produce an initial answer and an initial set of interrogatories and requests for permission in 2 minutes. Now, that takes training of the system. It's something that can be done on repetitive types of complaints, maybe not so much a very complex class action complaint. But if you think about Walmart and the types of matters we have a lot of repetitive negligence type complaints filed against the company. And so when you think about some of that more repetitive work, artificial intelligence is already taking a place in handling it. And through that partnership, we found that the time it would take to review the complaint, answer the complaint, and edit, we can reduce that total time by 60 or 70%. Sure. There still needs to be an attorney there who reviews what the software puts out, but it's obviously freeing up a lot of that attorney time to do more strategic type tasks. Another piece of technology we've really implemented here recently is a partnership with Pursuit. It's an RFP provider. That was really something that I think we had done before, were hold RFPs in various form and fashion. But what the new software we use now does is it allows us to leverage the software in a way that we can handle much greater volume. It also provides for reverse auction function and feedback function through use of an evaluation system. But it is now that we can leverage technology to have more RFPs. We can really get a lot more information on the front end. And just as for instance, we can take that software and run an RFP, and then within 2 to 3 days, get responses back from a handful of firms as to how they would handle the case. And again, it goes back to making better informed decisions. And that's what that technology does. Obviously, we could talk about many others. There's contract management software. There's a lot of knowledge management software that's going to change how the practice is performed, which is really just taking older principles and putting them into a technological framework.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those. I really appreciate it. Well, let's, kind of bringing this notion of the legal operations conversation to a close. I just want you to, if you could, share with my listeners how people could learn more about legal operations in this role that's critical that you play at Walmart.
I think there are any number of articles you could find on the internet. In fact, being in this role, have subscribed to a number of different publications that focus on legal operations, and there's a lot of articles. But if I was to advise anyone who's just starting out to learn some of the basic principles, I would send them to three different groups, all of which can be found on the internet. One is CLOC, the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, which has a lot of resources, but also has a really good 12 pillars of legal operations to give a sense. And there are things like vendor management, change management, financial management, and various other items of importance to any legal operations function. And those 12 pillars are often repeated and placed into articles. The other place I would go is the ACC. The Association of Corporate Counsel has a legal operations group, and this is a fantastic group of people who are collecting materials, obviously sharing best practices. And one of the things that they've done that really is impressive is they put together the ACC Legal Operations Maturity Model. And so if you're just starting out as a corporate legal operations group, you can review this maturity model and see where you are and probably where you want to go. And the last one I would mention is Buying Legal Counsel. This is a group that also you can find on the internet. They have a procurement focus. So this is really honed in on the vendor procurement and vendor management piece a little more so than the other two. But it does provide a different way, and its whole purpose is to explore different ways of procuring legal services. And I mention those all as things that really are designed for corporate counsel. But I have also suggested to law firm members and attorneys that these are things you should know about because it's what your clients care about.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Alan. Let's pivot a little bit to something just to get your perspective, being at probably the largest retailer in the world. Can you give us your impressions on the future of retail? Where do you see the industry that you've been in for such a while headed? And obviously, there's stuff on Wall Street Journal and many other publications constantly. But from your perspective, where do you see retail heading?
Well, I think that it for some time there has been an emphasis on the omni-channel, which is retail is no longer just simply relying on the brick and mortar stores to function. It is looking at all the different ways that consumers want to purchase goods and services. And so I would say that is one of the things that will continue to evolve is the way and the places and the manner in which we purchase goods and services. Just for instance, now, if you think about it, more so than any other time, we are purchasing things digitally. We're purchasing them on our mobile phones, on our computers. But then again, sometimes we also like the convenience of the stores. And I think where Walmart in particular is positioning itself is to leverage its geographic footprint in order to make all of that process easier. At the same time, providing convenience where we can through our pickup program, which is very popular, our delivery and many of our online places to purchase goods and services. So I think that those are some of the things that will continue to evolve. The other thing that I would see is really looking at a brand-centric type of retail environment so that consumers who are really becoming more brand-focused again have known places that they can go to get what they want. There are many other changes that are occurring that I'm not an expert in, but am glad to watch evolve, all of which means changes to the business model of Walmart and any other retailer. And so I think that those changes help bolster or drive the need for everything I've been talking about, which are changes and efficiencies within your legal department and by way of a legal operations group.
Kind of along the same lines, where do you think the future of law is headed? Would love to get your perspective on that, Alan.
That's a complex question, but it's we are in the midst of change, whether some recognize it or not. And it's one of the things that I've touched upon when I've spoken to groups about legal operations. I don't want to say that legal operations is the end all and be all, but it is really, if you look at it kind of this transitional period we're in right now, from taking what I describe as kind of that genesis of more technology and different types of individuals doing different types of work in the e-discovery realm and evolving into this legal ops function. I think what you're going to see in the future is a lot more strategic work being handled by lawyers and a lot less of the commoditized work being handled by lawyers. I also think that there's really no way to avoid non-lawyer investment or ownership of legal services in the U.S. It's happening overseas. It will probably continue to grow here until it's found its way here. And I think that technology obviously is going to change the way in which we practice law. The more bold predictions, I think, would be that you see more focus on niche lawyers. In other words, when I started out, I was very much a generalist litigator, and I think more and more people are going to have to find expertise. I think that lawyers will be doing higher value work, more business advisement than ever before. And some of that's going to cause the law firms themselves to change business models. But I don't believe that you're going to that you will need less lawyers. In fact, just as we talk about all of these changes, the different types of law that are out there that need lawyers are changing as well. I mean, who would have thought 10 years ago that privacy law would be as big as it is? Cybersecurity is as big as it is. The Internet of Things is going to change the regulatory environment in ways we couldn't have thought of 10, 15 years ago. I never thought that there'd be people who were practicing in expertise of drone law, but there are. I could go on and on. But I think that goes to this idea that we're going to be seeking a lot more specific expertise in our lawyers. And lawyers will be assisted greatly by technology and by non-lawyers.
When we had kind of prepared for this call, you had shared with me this notion of a backup plan. I usually ask it in a different way when I talk to attorneys about, what would you be doing if you weren't a lawyer? But let's assume, things change at Walmart and you found yourself on the street. What else would you be doing, Alan?
One, I think that if I continued in the operations space, I would love to help other companies design their own legal operations function, and that being from the smallest to the largest companies, because I think there's a place for it in all sides of corporate legal departments. Also advising law firms on how they can better serve their corporate clients vis-a-vis this idea of efficiencies and technology and better processes and different people handling matters. So I'd like to think that if I was no longer here, that I could continue in advising people. In addition to that, and I get to do that a lot today through benchmarking and best practice conversations with a lot of different corporations, actually dozens and dozens I've had the opportunity to talk to. I'd like to continue that. I also am training to be a certified coach, and that stems from my desire to help people get to where they want to go. I have always had a passion for helping others get to where they want to go or to solve their problems. I love solving problems. So those are a couple of the things I could see myself doing. In my role today, I also end up being a de facto mediator at times. So that's something also on the table. But I'll hope that Walmart finds use for me still for a while.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I'm sure they will. Let's spend a little bit of time on this notion of you being a certified coach. Who would be your client, and what would be your target? Like, who would you be trying to help, and what problems would you be trying to solve for them?
I think the core client would be lawyers, just because that's where my experience lies, and that's what I know and what I really have a passion for. And specifically within that realm, I would really, and I've started to do this through a couple of different avenues, I'd really like to help the generation that's coming out of law school or has recently come out of law school to help find their way. in this profession because I think it's going to be evolving on their watch and it's going to affect them or their careers much more than it will some of us who've been in the profession a while. And so when I think about it, it's lawyers, it's particularly younger lawyers to start with, and helping them navigate the career choices they make. I also have had the experience now of being in a firm, being in a corporation, and so I have a little bit more breadth of experience than others. And then in addition to that experience, I've also taken on a number of mentorships of younger lawyers and, in fact, law students. And, of course, I do teach at the University of Arkansas Law School, and that's given me an opportunity to kind of hear from this generation that's coming out and that has recently come out. But beyond lawyers, I do think that some of my experience lends itself to an overall business coaching practice simply because one of the things that I've been trained on and had experience in now is problem solving. And while you need subject matter expertise for some problems, some are as simple as using good logic and reason and using the best people in the best places.
It sounds like you would definitely bring a lot of value to those relationships. Alan, you had spoken, initially, and it's been a theme throughout our call today, the interview, that you have a desire to lead, to serve. Coaching came up, consulting came up. And I just want to ask you, sometimes leaders are born, many of them are made. And I want to ask you, what experiences in your life have caused you to want to be the leader that you are today? Whether it was the home you were raised in, your other work environments, was there any formative experiences in your life that formed you to be the leader today?
I don't know if there was any one or two or any specific formative events, but I would credit a lot of it to the way I was raised, with the virtues I was raised with. And that's what points me in the direction of servant leadership. It gives me, I guess, based on the way I was raised, it gives me great satisfaction to help people and help others solve their problems. I think I've always been someone who's been asked to do that from a very young age to help solve problems, but also going back to my time in junior high and in high school, being asked to lead programs, initiatives, clubs, and that continued on through college and law school. And it's just given me a great satisfaction to be able to lead groups of people in the right direction. And I think that's where a lot of it stems from. It's just kind of my upbringing and an opportunity to lead others in other situations.
Yeah. I don't know if you could share either what it was, maybe your parents or your grandparents. Was there anything specific that they kind of disseminated to you, the way your dad led or others in your family? Just curious around that.
It was more, I think, of my parents and just the way they raised me to treat and to interact with others. And that's really the sense I got from them to really want and desire to help and lead others really just comes from the way that they thought that you should treat people. And it's carried over from me because actually when I was in my formative years, I was not going to be a lawyer. I was headed to med school. It's just what I thought I was meant to do. And I took a big U-turn my first year of college and realized that it was not for me, and that actually the legal profession gave me the opportunity to help others, maybe in a different way, obviously, than a medical degree would have. But it really built upon the strengths that I had, which were, relationships with others, speaking, writing, and a lot of reason and logic. A lot of the skill sets that I had naturally gravitated me towards the law rather than med school. So I think it all stems from, again, going back to just overall how I was raised.
Yeah, that's excellent. So how do you and the family enjoy life away from work?
My wife and I have two beautiful children. My son is 6.5, and my daughter is 4.5. And We spend quite a bit of time on their activities, everything from soccer to football, baseball, now starting basketball, and then my daughter dance, cheerleading, gymnastics, and soccer herself. And so we spend a lot of time outside of our work schedules with their activities and really enjoy it. My wife and I talk often about work-life balance when I speak places and have spoken about this before with a lot of lawyers. She's not a lawyer, but she is a neonatal intensive care unit nurse, and she works nights. So with a little bit of help from others, we somehow manage a pretty hectic schedule and try to balance those activities. But that's what we do. We just do it and enjoy it, every bit of it.
Yeah, that's amazing that she works nights and you've got days with the kids. So I also like to ask everyone I interview what people are reading right now, what's on their bookshelf. Do you have any recommendations or anything you've been reading lately?
I don't think I have any recommendations. I take that back. It's been a couple of years, but I think the book Mindset by Carol Dweck is a really important work. It really reaffirmed in me a lot of things about a growth mindset that I knew I had in me, but I needed to read again. Most recently, I read a book called Primal Leadership by Daniel Goleman, which really talks about the emotional intelligence aspects around leadership and how those can serve you in different situations and which leadership style to take on in those various situations. But those are a couple of good ones. There are probably others I could think of. Just can't think of them right now.
Yeah. Well, kind of last question I wanted to ask is, what is something, Alan, you've learned this past year, the past couple of years that has impacted how you live personally or professionally?
It's maybe not something I've learned, but again, it's been reaffirmed this here recently, and that is that you can never escape change. Change is going to occur in your life, your personal life, and your professional life. And for me, I've had a number of changes in the past year, both personally and professionally, that have really, they increase your stress because you sometimes internalize those changes and really make them affect you more so than they actually do. And one of the ways that I try to look at those things is, I can only control two things, how I take in the change and then how I react to it. And so I think really going through a lot of changes, both here in the legal department and which are continuing, and then also in personal life, like I said, we live a very busy personal or I have a very busy personal life, has caused me to refocus on balance and making sure that I'm headed in the right direction no matter where I go, but also to realize that there's some things that are outside of my control, and I can only react in the way that I can and be prepared for what comes next if I'm open to the change itself.
That's excellent. Alan, thank you so much. It's been an honor and pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you, Chris. I've enjoyed talking with you today.
Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. If you have questions or would like to recommend someone to be on the podcast, please email them to podcast@findthelions.com. If you like this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes. Also, share our podcast with others via email or social media. To go to our podcast, listen to more shows, or to read the transcription of this audio, go to liongroup.recruiting.com/podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. This podcast is for education purposes only. This content cannot be used for commercial use without written permission from the Lion Group. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes.